November of 2021 marked the 10th anniversary of delay in block productions. To celebrate, we're looking back at some of our favorite Michigan line memories over the last decade. And what better place to start than Amtrak's 40th anniversary train? On the evening of October 7th, 2011, we caught the train at track speed in Parma, Michigan, as it made its way to Jackson. As part of their 40th anniversary tour, the exhibit train visited 40 cities between 2011 and 2012. Jackson was selected as the train's Michigan stop because of its central location between Detroit, Kalamazoo, and Lansing. Upon arriving at Jackson, NPCU number 406 and P40DC number 822 were uncoupled from the train so that they could be placed on the west end of the consist. The two restored Amtrak locomotives sure looked great in Phase 3 paint. The train's exhibit cars consisted of one 1950s-era Bud sleeper, 3 baggage-turned exhibit cars, and a single Am fleet that was used as a rolling railroad merch store. On the morning of October 8th, we returned to Jackson Station to watch the inbound Wolverine trains. The first to arrive was westbound train 351. 351 is one of the more popular Michigan trains since it allows riders to experience a full day in Chicago. In the afternoon, trains 353 and 350 met at Jackson. Since the exhibit train was occupying Main Track 1, eastbound train 350 would wait for train 353 to board before changing mains at CP Jackson. Throughout the day, the public was able to tour the exhibit train and visit with vendors from the Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers and the Central Michigan Model Railroad Club. The event was enjoyed by families from all over the state. This event was the first of its kind in 63 years. The last time an exhibit train visited Jackson was in August of 1948, when the original Freedom Train was displayed to promote American values of liberty in the wake of World War II's end less than 3 years prior. Inside Jackson Station, the vendors set up booths promoting passenger rail. The Central Michigan Model Railroad Club set up a wooden train table where the young rail fans could have a hands-on railroad experience. That evening, a wedding party stopped by for a photo op with the train station. Not realizing a special event was already being held there, Amtrak police coordinated the photo shoot so that the couple could safely take photos with their wedding party in front of the train. Prior to the arrival of Wolverine Train 352, we were invited on a private tour of the exhibit train's locomotives. Road Foreman of Engines Marcia Marsh guided us through each unit and explained the many features within the cab and engine compartments.
Shut down nicely right now. Well, here's where you're running HEP. Your engine control right here. Yep. All your fuses for running lights, stinger, dryer, window meters, satellite system, tap signals, what have you. Your track motors. Your marker lights and all this. That's that together shot. There's your engine room. horsepower, even though this is a P40, it did have to rebuild this half a higher bigger motor. Traction room?
Number 406 was built for Amtrak by EMD in July of 1988 as a 3,000 horsepower F40PH. It was retired from regular service in 2001 and was stored at Amtrak's shops in Beech Grove, Indiana. It was rebuilt in 2011 as a non-powered control unit specifically for the exhibit train. Notice that it doesn't have a prime mover. It is, however, equipped with a head-end power generator, or HEP unit, to power the lights and the HVAC systems on board the train. In the last decade, 406 has been used in push-pull service in various regions on the Amtrak system, most notably on the Downeaster. On the evening of October 9th, after being on display for most of the day, the exhibit train departed Jackson for its next stop, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The train left the Rose City around 6 p.m. Jumping ahead, we caught the westbound train at track speed near Parma, Michigan in golden hour light. It would be our last glimpse of the train as yet another chapter of Michigan Railroad history came to a close. In 2012, the Michigan Department of Transportation purchased 135 miles of the former Michigan Central Railroad main line from the Norfolk Southern Corporation between Dearborn and Kalamazoo, Michigan. At the time, Norfolk Southern was no longer interested in maintaining track conditions that allowed for reliable passenger service, so the state of Michigan stepped in to purchase the line for an estimated $150 million. Norfolk Southern would remain the freight operator, but the state and Amtrak would take over the maintenance and dispatching to enhance passenger service. Eventually, MDOT and Amtrak hoped to upgrade the entire Dearborn to Kalamazoo corridor to allow for speeds up to 110 miles per hour. Through federal funding, the state has received nearly $200 million for upgrading the line to high-speed standards. Amtrak has actually owned the 97 miles of track between Kalamazoo and Porter, Indiana, since 1976. The first high-speed train to run on that portion of the Michigan line operated on February 7, 2012. On January 7, 2012, we set out to record one of Amtrak's only true dome cars, the Ocean View, which was wearing the iconic Phase 3 paint scheme. Throughout the summer of 2012, we documented many of the local trains in and around the Rose City. In fact, most of Norfolk Southern's Michigan Line locals are based out of Jackson. we took a few moments to observe wrecked Amtrak P42DC number 128 as it sat on a flat car. The locomotive was leading Wolverine number 351 on the morning of February 1st, 2012, when it collided with a lowboy semi-truck trailer at 60 miles per hour in Leone, Michigan. Thankfully, there were no fatalities. However, 6 people were seriously injured. On a different day, we caught train B22 east of Albion with another high hood GP38-2 on the point. On another summer afternoon, we caught B22 once again with a pair of high hood GP38-2s running long hood forward. Albion, Michigan is a small town in Calhoun County with a population around 8,400 people. It's also home to the nationally recognized Albion College. The small town was once a junction point between the Michigan Central and the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern railroads. The two railroads met just west of the present-day Amtrak depot. The lead locomotive, 5140, was rebuilt in October of 2015 by Juniata Shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and was equipped with an Admiral cab. 5140 was later sold to Progress Rail in April of 2020. The trailing unit was sold to the Northwestern Pacific Railroad in 2016 and now operates on the Napa Valley Wine Train in California.
in the gate, I'll go about 5 and I'll bend some rail. 5, copy, 5.
In October of 2012, we caught Norfolk Southern's Battle Creek to Jackson turn job, the B-34, at Parma, Michigan with a GP38-2 leading long hood forward. In downtown Jackson, we found the train descending the hill as the crew prepared to take the lead track into Jackson Yard. Norfolk Southern 5044 was built by EMD in March of 1972 for the Southern Railway. 10 years later, it became part of the Norfolk Southern system, where it operated in both mainline and local service for the next 3 decades. In the late 2000s, the locomotive spent a significant amount of time in Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. It was frequently assigned to Jackson and Battle Creek when not working the steel mill jobs near Gary, Indiana. In 2016, the locomotive was retired and placed into a deadline in Roanoke, Virginia. In August of that year, 5044 was sold to the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum in a locomotive auction. Today, it serves Volkswagen's automotive plant outside of Chattanooga on TVRM's Tyner Terminal Railway. On November 22, 2013, we chased one of the last Norfolk Southern maintenance of way trains over the now state-owned Michigan line. At the time, Norfolk Southern was still partially responsible for maintenance, even though the state of Michigan took ownership nearly 1 year earlier. Leading the train was Norfolk Southern High Hood GP50, number 7004. Between Leone and Grass Lake, we paced the train as it continued east. Originally built in September of 1980 by EMD for the Southern, GP50 number 7004 was one of 90 such units on the railway's roster. It was built to handle high-priority TOFC trains and eventually became part of Norfolk Southern's roster in 1982, where it continued in mainline service until the late 2000s. For the remainder of its career as a GP50, 7004 was relegated to local service. 1 month after this footage was recorded, the locomotive was retired and stored in Altoona, Pennsylvania, to be rebuilt as a GP33 Eco. Through federal and state grants, Norfolk Southern rebuilt 28 of their former GP50s into the low-emission GP33 Eco class to meet the EPA's Tier 3 emissions standards. In January of 2015, the former 7004 emerged from Juniata shops as number 4700, the class leader. The 4-axle locomotive was equipped with large flared radiators, an Admiral cab, and was dressed in a stunning green and black paint scheme. It was also equipped to operate as a master unit for the NS 645 series RP M4C road slugs and is radio control equipped. 4700 was rebuilt with state funding from Illinois, where it remains in yard and local service around Chicago. Closing in on Chelsea, Michigan, we caught the camp train at track speed. Note the distinctive sounding P3 air horn, a Southern Railway tradition. East of Chelsea, Michigan, at Control Point Lake, the maintenance of way train was held for Amtrak's geometry train, which was taking scans of the trackage profile between Dearborn and Kalamazoo. The geometry train was traditionally handled by Norfolk Southern, but since MDOT took ownership of the line in 2012, That responsibility was transferred to Amtrak. Unfortunately, it would become too dark to document the maintenance of way train any further, so we called it a night. Thankfully, this wouldn't be our last time seeing a GP50 on the Michigan line.
I'll get on the front end.
One week later, on November 25th and 26th, we caught Norfolk Southern GP38-2 number 5044 once again on local train B16. Train B16 is one of Jackson's 2 yard jobs that assembles outbound trains and switches local industries. On this day, B16 was working OmniSource metals recycling on the former Cincinnati Northern Railroad branch. OmniSource is one of Norfolk Southern's primary customers in Jackson and receives switching service daily. Later that evening, we found train B22 in Albion with 5076 leading the train at track speed. B22 works several customers in Albion, including the Andersons elevator west of town. The next day, we returned to Jackson Yard to follow 5044 on the Cincinnati Northern. The caboose in the foreground is an N10 series that was built by Penn Central in 1969. Number 24039 was the resident caboose in Jackson for many years until it was scrapped in 2020. OmniSource is always bustling with activity. This congestion means that train crews sometimes have to flag crossings. At the main office, the conductor stepped off the locomotive to direct traffic. After working OmniSource, we caught the train at South Street as it made its way down the Cincinnati Northern. Since there isn't a passing siding at OmniSource for the locomotive to run around the gondolas, B16 will take the Cincinnati Northern just a few miles south to Gordeau Max Steel, where there's a short runaround track. The Cincinnati Northern Railroad reached Jackson in 1899 and was the last railroad to do so. It was a conglomeration of several other smaller railroads that formed a 186-mile line from Jackson to Cincinnati, Ohio. In 1901, the CN was taken over by the Big Four Railroad. 5 years later, New York Central acquired the Big Four and operated the Cincinnati Northern until the Penn Central merger in 1968. 8 years later, beginning in 1976, much of the Cincinnati Northern main line would be abandoned under Conrail. Today, several other short sections remain in the Ohio towns of Bryan, Cecil, Van Wert, Greenville, Germantown, and Carlisle. This was the last time we saw high hood GP38-2 number 5044 before it was transferred to another location. In March of 2014, we spent some time along the Michigan line after a snowfall. On the afternoon of the 14th, Amtrak 350 was arriving at Jackson Station with a train of 4 Superliner coaches. Since the plumbing on the Horizon coaches tend to freeze when temperatures drop, superliners are sometimes used on the Michigan line in the winter months. At the time this video was recorded, Brian Karhoff, the man seen wearing the high-visibility vest, was Jackson's lead station agent. Karhoff was hired on in 1974 and retired in 2018, spending 44 years with Amtrak at Jackson Station. The conductor on the train that morning was our friend Mike Kay. It was his first day as lead conductor on the Wolverine.
Hey Mike, it's going good.
Watch the lane block, good videos.
Yeah. There we go. See you later.
Bringing up the rear of the train was one of Amtrak's Sightseer lounge cars. These cars are available to ride on most Amtrak long-distance trains and are a popular place to grab a quick snack, unwind, or meet new people. The upper level offers a more dramatic view of the passing scenery with wraparound windows. Inside Jackson Station, the Christmas decor was still on display. For many years, Ed Rutkowski, the station's unofficial historian, would set up a large Christmas tree in the center of the waiting room for several months. He, along with several other volunteers, would also set up lights, wreaths, mistletoes, and other Christmas decorations for the enjoyment of passengers. Unfortunately, in recent years, Amtrak put a stop to the Christmas decorations and cited liability concerns. After taking a look inside Jackson Station, we watched as the train crew helped a passenger board Wolverine number 353. The train would depart shortly after 1:30 p.m., running a few minutes behind schedule. With train 353 on its way to Chicago, we decided to head west to Battle Creek, where Amtrak train crews swapped trains. From the station platform at Cereal City, USA, we watched as Amtrak Wolverine 352 slowly came to a stop. Beginning in the late 1970s, Conrail and Grand Trunk Western partnered with the state of Michigan and the city of Battle Creek to consolidate main lines. The project eased congestion downtown by moving all train traffic to one railroad line. By 1982, the transition was complete, and Amtrak opened its current depot between McCamley Street and Capitol Avenue. Amtrak and Norfolk Southern trains operate over Canadian National Railway's main line using trackage rights. Note that Train 352 was using the standard Wolverine passenger car equipment as opposed to the superliners. About an hour after Train 352 departed for Pontiac, eastbound CN train M39491 took its turn through downtown. It had a unique consist, which included a freshly painted Savage SW1500 and two former Burlington Northern SD60Ms. In the summer of 2014, we were able to document several other high-hood locomotives at Jackson. On August 20th of that year, we found this pair of GP38-2s on train B34. We caught the two locomotives with their rather short train at Jackson Station. At the time of this video, train B34 ran from Battle Creek to Jackson and back on Mondays through Fridays. After seeing B-34 depart for Battle Creek, we also recorded Amtrak Wolverine number 350 departing Jackson for points east. On a different day, we caught another pair of high-hood Jeeps on train B-22. Leading the two-car train west was GP38-2, number 5176, with a unique K5LA air horn. Every now and then, when a derailment occurs on the much busier Norfolk Southern Chicago line, the Amtrak Michigan line is used for rerouting high-priority trains. On Labor Day, September 1st, 2014, Capital Limited train number 29 was rerouted through Michigan. This date was also the station's 141st birthday, making it the oldest continuously operated passenger rail station in the United States. Several rail fans were gathered to see the train roll through town at track speed of 45 miles per hour. That same afternoon, we waited for Norfolk Southern train 39E at Leone, Michigan. The crossing we're standing at is where Amtrak P42 number 128, shown earlier in the video, struck the lowboy tractor trailer on February 1st, 2012. That same evening, we followed the now eastbound train running as symbol 39E as it made its way towards Grass Lake, Michigan. Train 38E was a road train that originated in Elkhart, Indiana and terminated in Jackson. Its counterpart, the 39E, followed the same routing from Jackson to Elkhart. At the time, this train typically operated at night. In fact, most of Norfolk Southern's Michigan Line trains still operate at night to prevent Amtrak delays. It's one of the few rail corridors in the United States where passenger service is considered the priority. For many rail fans, catching the 38 and 39E was a thrill, since they were the only sizable road trains to run on the Michigan line. They also frequently ran with wide cab GE and EMD locomotives. At CP Lake, east of Chelsea, we caught Amtrak Wolverine 355 as it met 39E in the siding. CP Lake is named for nearby 4 Mile Lake, a popular fishing spot for local sportsmen. Coincidentally, the siding is also 4 miles long and is nicknamed 4 Mile Siding. With Amtrak in the clear, 39E departed Chelsea around 7:30 p.m. 39E is bound for Wayne, Michigan, where it will work the yard before continuing to Toledo, Ohio, and then on to its final destination of Elkhart, Indiana. To our surprise, 1 year after seeing GP50 number 7004 on the work train, we caught Road Train 38E on the night of November 12, 2014, with GP50 number 7010 leading the train into Jackson. The trailing locomotives were equally exciting, with the second unit being High Hood GP38-2 number 5027 and SD90 43 Mac number 7287. The massive 90 Mac was acquired by Norfolk Southern from Union Pacific in September of 2014 due to a power shortage. It was rebuilt by NS as an SD70 ACU in 2017 and was sold 4 years later to Progress Rail in February of 2021. This was the last time we ever saw a GP50 High Hood leading a train on Norfolk Southern. The following day, we returned to Jackson Yard to document train B16, which was being pulled by a rare GP59. Norfolk Southern 4641 was set up to run long hood forward. At the time, Norfolk Southern's GP59s were unique in that they were among only a handful of low short hood units to be set up for long hood forward operation. The EMD GP59 is a 4-axle locomotive built by the Electromotive division of GM between 1985 and 1989. Power was provided by a 12-cylinder EMD 710 G3A diesel engine, which could produce 3,000 horsepower. This locomotive shared the same common frame with the EMD GP60, giving it an overall length of 59 feet 9 inches. It featured a 3,700 US gallon fuel tank. Only 36 examples of this locomotive were built, including 3 demonstrators. Norfolk Southern placed the only order for the GP59 and also acquired the 3 demonstrators, which featured a unique aerodynamic cab. Since this video was recorded, Norfolk Southern has rebuilt all of the GP59s. Number 4650 was the first to be rebuilt and was designated as a GP59E in March of 2013. The rebuilt locomotives feature new microprocessors, all new electrical cabinets with Smart Start, rebuilt prime movers, split cooling systems designed by Norfolk Southern, LSL, and upgraded electronic brake valves. In the winter of 2014 and 15, we caught train 39E twice on rare daylight movements. Here, on January 8, 2015, we recorded the train passing the Stone Michigan Central Railroad Depot at Grass Lake. The railroad arrived at Grass Lake in 1842. The town actually relocated when the railroad found cheaper land to the west. The town's first depot was wooden, but the rural community quickly outgrew that depot. In 1887, Michigan Central constructed the current depot, which only took 6 months to build. The 2,000 square foot stone structure was built in the Richardsonian Romanesque Revival style of architecture and features a high-peaked roof and stained glass windows. According to a local legend, the fancy depot was built by mistake. As the story goes, a group of railroad officials were traveling between Detroit and Jackson shortly after the depot opened, when one of them shouted to stop the train just beyond Grass Lake. After the engineer backed up to the depot, the man reportedly pulled out company blueprints, studied them for a few moments, and said, "My gosh, they built this depot in the wrong place." The right place was likely Niles, Michigan, where a large stone depot of the same style was built by the same firm, Spear and Rons, in 1892. Almost exactly 1 year prior, we documented 39E as it dashed through the snow in Chelsea, Michigan on January 8, 2014. Note the wooden depot to the left. Built in 1880, the depot is the only known example designed by the well-known Detroit architectural firm of Mason and Rice. On February 23, 2015, we chased train B-22 from Jackson to Albion. On this date, B-22 was led by GP38-2, number 5337, which was painted in the Operation Lifesaver scheme. At CP Albion, the train was given a medium approach signal. B-22 stops to work several industries in Albion and was headed for the Andersons elevator west of town. These Conrail-era tri-light signals were replaced by a modern LED cantilever-style signal later that year. This was the last train we documented going by the Conrail style signals before they were replaced by Amtrak. On March 7th, we decided to ride Amtrak from Ann Arbor to Kalamazoo and back. We boarded the early westbound train 351 at 7:40 a.m., which was pulled by two P42 DCs. Ann Arbor is the most popular station on the Amtrak Michigan line and averages about 155,000 passengers every year. Many of these riders are students from the University of Michigan. In Kalamazoo, we deboarded the train and set up our cameras at North Church Street. Kalamazoo is home to Western Michigan University and is the second most popular passenger station in Michigan, with an average ridership of 120,000. After filming our train as it departed Kalamazoo, we visited B.O. Tower to capture Amtrak's Blue Water Service train number 365 arriving at Kalamazoo Station. Milepost 143.3 is where Amtrak takes ownership of the former Michigan Central Main Line to Porter, Indiana. Amtrak took ownership of this segment in 1976 upon the startup of Conrail. Michigan Central's Botsford or B.O. Tower was opened on October 2, 1914. The tower was named after the Botsford Paper Mill Company, which located its tracks east of downtown in 1892. Michigan Central built a new yard to handle the paper mill traffic around 1904. It too was named Botsford and is still in operation today. The 44-lever interlocking tower was responsible for handling trains on the Grand Trunk Western, New York Central, and Pennsylvania railroads, as well as an interurban line. The present-day lines are operated by Watco's Grand Elk Railroad and Amtrak. Watco renamed the yard to Gearhart a few years ago after a longtime retired railroader. In 2018, we interviewed historian Graydon Mintz, the author of Railroads for Michigan, to learn more about B.O. Tower. Mintz actually worked at B.O. in the late 1950s.
Oh, I bet I worked there a dozen times over the years. To me, it was probably the best interlocking tower to work in. It was a challenge. We had yard engines going around town. We had 3 or 4 shifts of yard engines going. here, there, and the other place, they all had to be shuttled in between because the airline had been partly torn up, so all the freight traffic came through Kalamazoo, and you had all the passenger trains, and to keep all of it from flowing, it was a challenge. It was a challenge, but I always liked BO. It was just a good job to work, and we had good people and good crews to work with, and I remember looking out the tower window out to the south across the main line, and there was a long white building out there, and I always wondered, it's funny, that looks like a passenger station. And lo and behold, it was at one time. There was a place, a depot across the tracks from BO Tower called Kalamazoo Junction. And passengers changed trains from the Michigan Central to the GR&I through that depot. When I worked on the railroad, the signal department had it. And it's gone now, but kind of kitty corner across the diamond at BO Tower was the roundhouse for the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern. And that's still part of it there yet, behind Bell's Brewery.
At the time this video was recorded, BO was one of only 2 manned interlocking towers remaining in Michigan, with the other being on CSX rails at Delray, just outside of Detroit. It was also the oldest still in use within the state. Norfolk Southern personnel operated the tower until it was closed on October 24, 2016, when Amtrak took over dispatching of the Michigan line. The interlocking was upgraded to remote control so that the junction could be operated by the Amtrak train director in Chicago. After closing, several preservation efforts began with the intent to move the tower to another location.
So something like this is a vital piece of our history, not just to Kalamazoo and Southwest Michigan, probably to the Midwest in our country.
Nate Hatton, a train conductor working to save the tower, says up until recently the tower was still used.
Up until 2016, there'd be a tower operator in the tower controlling train movement throughout Kalamazoo. Now everything is controlled remotely out of Chicago.
MDOT now owns the tower and says it is open to having it restored, but anyone who saves it would have to pay to relocate it because the tower sits too close to the tracks.
We're pretty hopeful that we could get maybe the community involved, maybe some local businesses, people interested in preserving this vital piece of history that we have here.
Hatton would like to see the tower moved to another section of track in Kalamazoo and turned into a park where people can come and watch the trains.
A lot of these towers around the country have been repurposed as museums and campuses, places where the community can come together.
While hope is still alive, the future of the tower remains unknown, with MDOT planning to schedule it to face the wrecking ball in 2020.
Their timeline is early next year. If we don't come up with a solution, they're going to want to tear it down.
On Tuesday, December 28, 2021, the structure was demolished. After catching train 365, we boarded eastbound Wolverine 352 for our return back to Ann Arbor. We were happy to ride in the seasonal Superliner coaches, which made for a unique experience. At Ann Arbor, we debarked and recorded the train's departure. Note the plume of black exhaust fumes as the train accelerated out of town. During the early morning hours of April 11th, 2015, we waited for train 38E at Grass Lake after receiving a report from our friends Ryan and Sean Caton that Norfolk Southern Triclops SD60M number 6812 was leading the train west. At Jackson Yard, around 1 a.m., we watched as the train slowly crept by the yard office in sub-zero temperatures. We typically don't film trains at night, but when we do, it's for something really rare. Norfolk Southern acquired 9 SD60Ms of Burlington Northern heritage in 2014 in order to augment a motive power shortage that summer. The 9 SD60Ms, famous for their 3-piece cab windows, quickly became railfan favorites. Unfortunately, their time on Norfolk Southern was short-lived. By 2019, all 9 units were retired. Some were sold to Progress Rail, while others were scrapped. 6812 was scrapped by K&K Recycling in Adrian, Michigan. Later that same day, 38E made its last daylight run over the Amtrak Michigan line. In the afternoon, we set up shop at Control Point Miller, just east of Jackson Yard, where we patiently waited for the train. In charge of the train that day was a former Southern Pacific AC 4400 and an SD70AH. Note the somewhat rare flashing ditch lights on the former Southern Pacific GE. At the time this footage was recorded, CP Miller was the only remaining control point on the Michigan line to feature a New York Central steam-era bracket mast signal. Note the dial arm to the right. The blue circle indicated that there was a track between the signal mast and the track to which the signal applied. Around this time period, it was rumored that trains 38 and 39E would no longer run to Jackson. Instead of a road train, a local would run as a turn job from Jackson to Kalamazoo, where the Watco-owned Grand Elk Railroad would handle the train the rest of the way into Elkhart, Indiana.
Roger, thank you. Goodbye now.
As the train approached the yard, it ducked under the US 127 overpass, a 758-mile-long highway that stretches between Grayling, Michigan and Chattanooga, Tennessee. At Jackson Yard, we paused to take a closer look at the Armour yellow locomotives. The SD70AH would lead the train back to Elkhart later that evening. The next day, we returned to C.P. Miller to document Amtrak Wolverine number 353 as it approached Jackson. After seeing train 353 duck under the 127 bridge, we ventured to downtown Jackson, where the rather late train 350 was stopped just west of the searchlight signals at CP Jackson.
Stop CP Jackson, 2 East 350, Dearborn dispatch.
And that's Dearborn.
Dearborn 350, unit 28, ready to copy, over.
Roger that. We've got a 10-mile-an-hour speed restriction, 10 mph on the main. Milepost is going to be MH71.5, over.
Understand we have a 10 1 knot miles per hour on the single main there. Milepost is 71.5, 10 mile an hour, 71.5, over.
Roger that. That is correct. Time is 12:18 LVB.
Roger that. Okay, 12:18 LVZ, over.
Lima Victor Bravo.
Lima Victor Bravo. Roger that, over.
Roger that. Thank you.
Nice, Dearborn. 50. 50, depart now. Roger that. Here we go. Approach CP Jackson, Robin Jackson.
Later that evening, we caught local train B22 as it was returning from Albion with a pair of GP38-2s and 5 cars. Note the toy house sign to the right. As the train passes the New York Central searchlight signals at CP Jackson, note the foundation for the new cantilever signal. Jumping ahead of the train, we caught up with the B-22 at Elm Street as it arrived at Jackson Yard. On another windy April day, we returned to Control Point Miller to watch as eastbound Wolverine number 350 passed the tri-light signals. Note the short pot signal below the tall bracket mast. This signal controlled the yard lead for eastbound trains departing Jackson. By 2016, all of the remaining New York Central searchlight and tri-light signals through Jackson were replaced. Under the New York Central, Miller was actually called CP Falahy after the nearby Falahy Road. After the Conrail rationalization, it was called CP East Jackson. Later on, Norfolk Southern changed the name again to CP Miller because they thought that crews would confuse the CP East Jackson with CP Jackson. Miller was named so for Miller Truck and Storage, the present-day owners of the former Michigan Central Railroad shops at Jackson Yard. As the sun was setting, we returned to Jackson to document Wolverine number 355 arriving and departing Jackson Station. On this date, our friends Sean and Ryan Caton joined us to record the train passing by the old searchlight signals at CP Jackson. The signal to the far left, which you'll see as the camera zooms out, controlled the Jackson and Lansing Railroad at Francis Street and dated back to the steam era. The signal mast to the right, with the letter D to signify the distant signal, was established around 1960 when the New York Central Railroad changed the track layout in downtown. At the throttle that evening was engineer Dawn Marie Odell. At the time, she was one of only 2 female engineers on the Amtrak Michigan line. Dawn is always friendly to rail fans and frequently waves to say hello whenever she passes by.
Amtrak 355, clear to depart Jackson on the approach limited. Roger on that 30 and 75, 776, main 1.
Amtrak 355 departing Jackson on the approach limited. Roger on our 30, 75, 7 and 76.
On another cold and windy spring day, we waited at Mechanic Street to document Amtrak Wolverine number 353 as it departed Jackson. Unfortunately, these unique signals were removed and replaced in 2015. Another set of grade crossing signals similar to this pair remains in service in Blissfield, Michigan. As the train rolls by, you can hear our friend Amtrak conductor Danny Kaye shout out "Delay in block." On Mother's Day 2018, we documented the Mechanic Street crossing from the air as Jackson and Lansing Railroad train JL1 was given permission to cross the Amtrak Michigan line at CP Jackson. Note the present-day grade crossing signals as well as the new cantilever-style signal now controlling the interlocking. Going back to April of 2015, on another afternoon, we found Amtrak Wolverine Train 353 stopped at CP Hill near Lawrence Avenue. We decided to walk back to the train to visit with the crew as they waited on eastbound Wolverine number 350, which was running about 40 minutes behind schedule. Between Porter, Indiana and Chicago, Illinois, Amtrak trains take the Norfolk Southern Chicago line. Since freight trains are the priority on the busy corridor, Amtrak trains are frequently delayed. At CP Hill, you can see train 350 taking the siding. This section of double track continues for 6 miles to CP Miller at milepost 72. After 350 clears Hill, train 353 will be permitted to continue west. The overall theme of this production is trains or locomotives that you just can't see anymore. Well, here's a locomotive in a paint scheme that you certainly can't see anymore. On April 4th, 2015, 2 Amtrak P32 diesels were used in a special power move out of Chicago. We caught the pair in Michigan City, Indiana. The P32s are part of a series of 20 GE products built in 1991 to grace Amtrak's rails. The 519 was one of the last, if not the last, true Amtrak locomotive to wear the Phase 4 livery. Since the Dash 8 locomotives were not equipped with ITCS at the time, this was the first time in 4 years that a pair had operated over the Michigan line. Without an FRA waiver, the P-32s can't operate over an ITCS-equipped railroad. On this day, however, the locomotives were permitted to run over the Michigan line to milepost 228 so that they could pick up a cut of loaded ballast cars. Quite a few Amtrak personnel were needed to make this special move, including a road foreman and a train master. While in the yard, the two P-32s met a South Shore local freight train, which would be doing some switching in the area. Earlier in the video, we showed a Norfolk Southern maintenance of way train between Jackson and Chelsea back in 2013. By 2014, Amtrak was handling the maintenance of the corridor between Dearborn and Porter, Indiana. After catching the meet, we ventured over to CP Drawbridge, where we caught Amtrak's eastbound Wolverine number 352. After catching the 352, we caught westbound Wolverine number 353 under the former New York Central era steam locomotive coaling tower. After the two Amtrak trains cleared Michigan City, the South Shore local was permitted over the Michigan line so that it could return to South Shore-owned rails. In August of 2015, we caught the same pair of 4-axle Dash 8 locomotives in Jackson. From the station platform, we watched as local train B-22 passed the P-32s at CP Jackson while returning from Albion. After B-22 cleared CP Jackson, we set up near Francis Street to record the 2 P-32s departing town. As the train passes by our camera, you'll see crewman Lee Lovelet stepping out to wave at us. At Albion, we caught the train again as it made its way west towards Battle Creek. In Battle Creek, we caught the train at the Post Factory west of Hinman Yard. Battle Creek is known as Cereal City, USA, due to the fact that both Post and Kellogg's are headquartered there. Both companies have been making cereals in Battle Creek for over 125 years. This was the last time we saw the train before the crew tied down west of C.P. Custer. On the evening of June 14, 2015, we revisited Norfolk Southern's Jackson Yard to watch train B33 depart during the golden hour sunlight. The train had 93 cars in tow, which was one of the longest trains we've seen originate out of Jackson. B33 is the local that replaced trains 38 and 39E. The train's motive power consisted of a top hat Dash 940C, nicknamed so for the air conditioner unit above the cab roof, and an Operation Lifesaver GP60, EMD's last North American 4-axle locomotive. At the time this video was recorded, Norfolk Southern was the only operator of the Dash 940C, with 125 locomotives once on the roster. After their initial order in 1995, the FRA demanded that Norfolk Southern purchase the wide cab version of the Dash 9 for safety reasons. If the FRA hadn't stepped in, all of Norfolk Southern's Dash 9s would likely have been equipped with standard cabs. Jackson Yard is home to the former Michigan Central Railroad shops. Now owned by Miller Truck and Storage, the shops still stand in 2022. Built in 1872 and designed by master builder Henry H. Gardner, the shops were the Central's main repair facilities in the United States. Since Jackson is centrally located in southern Michigan, it made for the perfect location for the railroad's locomotive and car shops. The shops permanently closed as a repair facility in the mid-1970s. After a series of fires, Miller Trucking rebuilt most of the interior of the historic shop buildings that are now utilized as warehouse and storage space for large equipment and machinery for customers. Jumping ahead of the train, we set up our cameras at CP Hill. CP Hill is located near Jackson County's Reynolds Airfield. Reynolds is where the NASCAR drivers were flying home from Sunday's rain-tormented race at Michigan International Speedway. After the westbound Wolverine cleared, we caught the train as it slowly accelerated over the crest of Jackson Hill. we caught the train one more time in the setting sun at Albion, Michigan. Albion's depot was built for the Michigan Central in 1882. The MC depot was abandoned in the early 1970s, but was restored by local community groups in the mid-80s. Today, it once again serves passengers as well as inter-city buses under Greyhound. A portion of the building is rented out to private businesses, thus generating income for maintenance. This was our last time catching train B33 before nightfall. From Albion, the train continued on to Battle Creek, where it would wait for permission over the Canadian National before arriving in Kalamazoo later that night. Thank you for watching Delay in Block Productions. We hope you enjoyed reminiscing with us as we looked back at some of our favorite Michigan line memories from the last decade. Until next time, happy railroading.